What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 631. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, stayed home from school today, did we? Or yesterday?
Yes. Denver had a snow day, so we got to do that. I
don't get it. Why do they have snow days in Denver? Like, isn't that just the norm?
Honestly, from the email that it got, it was a combination of unexpectedly low temps plus there was just a lot of people out because of Omicron. So
yeah, of course. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it only takes a few bus drivers, for example, to be out to affect a large.
That was actually exactly it. It was that they had enough bus drivers out that they were just going to have issues getting some of the kids into class. So
yeah. So a rare snow day in Denver for the mild Nakatl. She must have been thrilled.
Oh yeah, huge jackpot. You're 5 years old. You get a snow day out of nowhere. Just absolute win.
It's the absolute best. Speaking of the absolute best, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite things in the world of Magic. We're going to be talking about Cube Draft today. We've been getting a bunch of questions on Twitter about Cube, mainly for a few reasons. One, it's being used for a tournament thing on Arena, but also it's back on Arena, and also the Vintage Cube is up still from they call it the Holiday Cube, but that's the Vintage Cube run that we do every year, which is really an awesome tradition that they've got going now. Sometime in the middle of December, right in the middle of the holidays, they put up the Vintage Cube. The set that we've been playing, in this case, Vow, has been out for a while, so you're kind of ready for something else, and you could just kind of settle into the best format that Magic has to offer, which is Cube. We're going to actually break down both of the cubes that are currently running right now, and they're the ones that you see the most often. When you think of Magic Online, it's Vintage Cube, and on Arena, they have the Arena Cube, which is definitely creeping up the power rankings. They are not holding back with the power level cards that are going in there, and we're going to break down both of them, both from a big picture perspective, but also specifics about each cube to help you improve and get better at that, as this is really the primary way that we play Cube these days is online. So that's what you have to look forward to this show. First, we're going to talk about our sponsors, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all things Magic related. They're now a marketplace on the singles side of things. So if you're looking for singles, maybe you've got some holiday money burning a hole in your pocket, or you want to get together, a commander deck or construct a deck or something like that, you can head over to Channel Fireball. And when you search for the cards that you want, you're going to get a chance to choose from a range of different vendors now that are all presented right in front of you with the price, the condition, all of that type of stuff. And that's really a benefit, I think, for the consumer, as it gives you a lot more options, but still in the same place you're used to going over at Channel Fireball. So really cool. Make sure you check that out over there. And if you do buy anything at CFB, make sure you use the affiliate code LR at checkout. It helps out the show, and we appreciate it. Show's also brought to you by FTX. That's a place to go to manage your digital assets. It's regulated and it's safe. There's a U.S. site, ftx.us, which is subject to different regulations. That's, by the way, why it's a different site than ftx.com, which is for the rest of the world. And depending on where you live, you can check those out in an app or online, just in your browser, to buy, sell, trade your digital assets, things like cryptocurrencies and NFTs and that type of thing. If that's something that you're interested in, we highly recommend checking out FTX for that. And on top of it, FTX, has kind of a mission statement of being making the world a better place. And one of the ways that they do that is through charitable donations and charitable initiatives. And we've got one coming up. Actually, it's tomorrow, Luis, as of recording the show. It's on Saturday, January 8th.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a Vintage Cube Draft for charity. So you, me, BK, all the resources, plus Kenji Numata since he's actually through TSM part of FTX as well, are going to be drafting alongside four of the folks from FTX. And we're going to be playing where for every win you get money for the charity of your choice. I'm playing for Planned Parenthood, and you're playing for
Seattle Children's Hospital.
Perfect. And then there's also the Cube Achievements list that BK made a couple seasons ago. And when you hit those achievements, they're going to donate even more money just every time you hit one of those achievements. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, they're going to be donating to each of the charities regardless, but the if you do better in the cube, then you get more money for your charity. So it's just a win-win-win.
The floor is $2,500. Mm-hmm. You get $10K if you're the one who goes 3-0 and $5K if you go 2-1.
That's right. And then you can get those bonuses as well. So just a really cool event. And I'm going to be streaming it on my stream. And Luis is going to be streaming it on his stream at the very minimum. I'm sure Kenji will be streaming it too. And I assume BK will. I haven't talked to him about it, but I would assume so, that he'd fire up his stream for it.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
Okay. The ultra rare BK stream. But at any rate, it should be really fun. And we wanted to extend a thanks to FTX for including us in it and for coming up with the idea and managing a lot of it as well. Luis, I know you put in a lot of legwork and NLW over at FTX as well.
Yeah, myself and Nathaniel, one of their marketing guys, he's awesome. We I think the two of us basically handled all the things. I have to give a shout out to MTG Elo Project. They're going to be hosting the Cube Draft on they have their own draft program that we're going to use to draft. And Card Hoarder, it's going to be lending the people who don't have fully stocked accounts cards. Me and Kenji, I think, have drafted and played so much Magic Online, we're just going to use our own accounts. Mm-hmm. But yeah, a lot of folks coming together for this cool charity thing. And one last thing on it, I tweeted it out, but if you donate $10 to any 501c charitable organization, basically any charity, any registered charity, and you respond to the tweet with a screenshot, you're entered in the running for a unlimited Ancestral Recall. So they're giving that away to anyone who donates $10 to charity among those people. So
that's right. It's cool. Any charity you want, as long as it's an official, thing. Yeah, really cool, and just awesome of them to put this stuff up. It's one of the reasons that you and I like working with them. They put their money where their mouth is, as it were. Before we go on that, if you do decide to head over to FTX to do any type of investing or anything like that, just make sure that you consult an investment professional first. There's, of course, risk involved with investments of any kind, and you want to make sure that you know exactly the risk versus reward and all that type of stuff before you put your money down. So keep that in mind. Last but not least, of course, is the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. And it's really the backbone of the show. We want to thank each and every one of you over on Patreon. If you are a patron of the show, thank you. It really does mean the world to us, and we deeply appreciate it. We get to answer questions as well. Patreon question of the week. This one comes from Fromaginator, who says, I recently watched all of the MTG breakdown and wristwatch revival videos. Amazing work, by the way. Thanks. And it has been brought up several times. The multitude of different hats LSV wears between Eternal, Storybook Brawl, streaming, marketing, pro Magic player, multiple resource-based podcast hosts, etc. I was wondering if each of you could give a complete list of the different titles and roles you presently hold. And then from Imaginator says, I realized I didn't even mention coverage. Titles is a little tough. You and I are kind of
we're not so much on titles. But I mean, if you look at like the things we do that could be considered business, I guess is kind of what they're asking. Cause I know, I mean, look, just to preface this, it's going to sound like a lot for both of us, but that's because we're into like kind of content space where you really have to be, you don't have to be, but you really, in my opinion, should be basically trying a bunch of different stuff to make sure that you're really maximizing your opportunities to have something go well and to have a backstop. Yes. I mean, Marshall, coverage was a pretty large percentage of, kind of the money you relied on. Yeah. And then it basically got canceled. Yeah.
That's right.
And, pro Magic at various times has been larger or smaller part of what kind of I expect to have happen in a year, with the understanding it won't always happen. And they went ahead and basically canceled pro Magic. So there's a reason we have a lot of, irons in the fire, as it were. And I know for me, it's working at Storybook Brawl and Channel Fireball. So actually, funnily enough, as the current title at both is VP of Marketing, but I
do you want to be the VP of marketing for LR? Like we can, you want to go for the trifecta? It's there for you. The position's open.
Of course I do LR and CR. I stream and, I've got sponsors for the stream and whatnot. I write articles for Channel Fireball. Of course, that's part of, realistically, I'm not actually doing the marketing at Channel Fireball anymore. I used to do that. You remember I was like, in all those meetings and doing all that stuff. Now I'm basically a content producer for Channel Fireball, but I really do enjoy doing that. So that's not a problem in any stretch. It's part of it is just like the more the more stuff you do, the more of a backup you have if something ends up, not working out as well as you had hoped and whatnot.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback off of that because I think that that's a really important thing to understand about. Well, if you want to be a content creator, it's important to understand it. But even if you don't care about it, to the way that you view the content creators that you support or enjoy or whatever, you should know that that's part of the equation. I think, again, specifically if you want to be a content creator, you really, really need to be aware of this, which is how many irons in the fire do you have? Are you all in on one thing, or are you trying to have multiple things going? And I think for me, 3 things going is kind of where I want to be usually. For example, for a while, it was like the podcast, the coverage, and then kind of trying to find something in that third seat. I did the MTG Breakdown channel for a while, but that kind of came to a halt when we stopped traveling. And this was actually before the pandemic, when they decided not to do GP coverage anymore, because basically all the coverage all the content that I made off of MTG Breakdown was based on me being out on the road. I primarily did vlogs and then the breakdowns. The breakdowns were those videos where I sat down with a pro and went over a match of theirs. And I could pause it. We could talk about it and all that, but that requires me being next to professional players. I did briefly consider trying to do it, remotely, but I didn't like the idea of it. There's something about sitting next to somebody that you can get a better vibe for them and stuff. And so I kind of had to stop there. But that was okay. That was an okay time for me to transition away from that anyway. But like Luis said, I mean, if you were as full, as into coverage as I was or am, you kind of had the rug pulled out. I mean, it was like, whoa, just got a phone call one day and it was like, I was probably doing something like 18 to 22 events in a year. And then it was going to be like, okay, you got 4, it was like, what? For the year. Right. And it's like, okay, well, this is a totally different thing now. And, so for me, where I've currently landed is this podcast, and then the Wristwatch Revival channel, which I've been really fortunate because it's really taken off. And I've got, the subscriber count keeps going up and the views and all that stuff. So I've been really good to like put a bunch of effort into that. And that's what I put a lot of time into now as well, just to, as it's in this kind of growth stage and I'm figuring out kind of where it's going to fit in and everything. I want to make sure that I'm putting as much effort as I can into it to get it to wherever it's going to go. Not the time to slack off on that. But, if you look back at earlier parts of my career after I left, my corporate job, it was like, I used to write articles for Wizards. Like for years, I wrote the limited information. Yeah. Right. And that was like a weekly thing, right? Like I got paid per article and I got to write 1 per week. It was a column called Limited Information. And I took that over after a long line of really great limited writers there. And, eventually they changed the content model, and it was like, that was it. It wasn't anything I did. Like, they're like, no, we really like, in fact, they still use me for some stuff, for like a year after that, every once in a while, but it just, those, weekly columns got all taken out. And so I didn't have any work for that anymore. And it was like, wow, that was, 4 times a month I was getting paid for those articles. And, that makes up a good chunk of your rent or whatever when you add it up. And it was like, nope, that's gone. So, I've really learned over time to make sure that I'm diversified and have things going. The other thing that I wanted to touch on about that I think is really interesting is there are actually different ways you can do that as well. And you should think about this if you are starting to do your own content or you're, starting to strike out on your own, because you can do it in a very safe way. For example, you can make content for somebody else, right? I can say, okay, Wizards wants to pay me to do these articles. I write the articles. I hand them over. They're their articles. If it gets 1 trillion views, I don't get any more money than what they said. But you know what? It's consistent. Like, they're going to just give me that much, and I know what I'm going to get, and I'm going to be happy with that. Okay, that's one way to do it. But the other way to do it is to do it on your own, right? So I'm going to start my own website where I write my own articles, let's say. And now if it blows up, you benefit, proportionately. Similarly, if you're going to, go be a part of a startup company or something like that, you can say, look, I want to get in on the ground floor on this. I want to own part of this company. I don't want to just be an employee of the company. And, each time that you decide to make more content, you have to decide, am I going to do this for somebody else or am I going to do this for myself? And am I willing to take the risks that are associated with that? Because there's many different factors that could go into it and you have to take a personal look at it. Am I in a position where I can say, I'll put some amount of time, effort, and money into this, and if it strikes out, I'm okay with that? Or am I in a position where I'm not okay with that because I have bills I need to pay or family to support or whatever, and I need a paycheck, right? And I can't take the risk on that big high upside. I just need to make sure that I'm covering my bases. And you should always be asking yourself that each time you do it, because there's been a number of times that people have, at least sort of vaguely put on the table to buy LR. And I've never considered that because it doesn't really make sense to me. But when I did think about it, I thought, well, what would that actually look like? And what I realized in retrospect was that, the harder you work for this stuff, the more you can benefit from it. But if you sell it to somebody else, then that's not the case anymore. So I never really was interested. But yeah, the stuff I'm doing now is mainly the podcast and the wristwatch revival. But, I do still do coverage when it pops up. So, that's not completely gone. And I try to kind of keep myself busy in as many ways as I can. Thanks for the question. I think we should probably just do an episode about this at some point. I know it's like super, super off topic, but you and I talk about this stuff offline and we have a lot to say about it. And maybe we should just throw that into the world sometime. At any rate, let's get back to Magic here. Cube. So first off, just for people that are a little newer to it, when we say cube, what do we mean?
So cube means it's a draft collection. So you draft from a predetermined set of cards. The most common number is 540, because what that means is when you have 8 players drafting, 15 card packs, 3 packs each, 360 of the cards are in play. So half the cards, or 2/3 of the cards rather, are in play in any given draft. But cubes can really be any number of things. Like it can be, 540 cards or 360 or 1,000 or whatever. Mm-hmm. What we're going to talk about today is the vintage cube on Magic Online and the arena cube. And those are the two that are most commonly played by people online at this point. A lot of people have their own personal cubes, like our cube built, that you cube with your friends. That was my introduction to cube, actually. And, Gabby has a vintage cube we have to update. We haven't updated in a couple sets. But basically, cube drafting is a combination of draft plus constructed, because it is draft. You're opening packs, you're looking at cards. You're not guaranteed to see anything. You obviously are drafting your deck and are building it afterwards. But it's like constructed, more the vintage cube than the arena cube, which we'll get to, because you've got really powerful sets of cards. I mean, the vintage cube has Black Lotus and all the Moxes. They have cards like Tinker and Show and Tell and Sneak Attack and Natural Order. These just like fantastically powerful cards. Mm-hmm. And you end up drafting decks that tend to be highly synergistic and capable of really busted things. Cube decks are somewhere, I don't know which format exactly, but some of them are more powerful than modern decks. They're all more powerful pretty much than standard decks.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's really the defining factor, is that you are playing limited, but these decks do not play out the same way that a normal limited deck does, really across the board. Power level, consistency, mana, all of it is better in cube on average. What are the rules of cube?
So my 3 rules of cube, if you don't know anything about cube and want a short introduction, are take cheap cards over expensive ones. The most common mistake people do when they first come to cube is overvalue cards like Consecrated Sphinx or Grave Titan or Primeval Titan or Karn Liberated. The Hydroid Krasis, these powerful cards that kind of they kind of light up the bomb center in your brain, right? When you're like, If I was drafting and opened a Grave Titan, obviously I would slam it. But in cube, almost always you should take Preordain over Grave Titan. You should take Mana Leak over, Consecrated Sphinx.
Yep.
Cheap cards are at a premium. Everyone has enough playables. And by enough, I mean like more than enough. You're not going to be stressed about playables. You can even switch relatively late and still end up okay. What is important is to make sure you have early plays. And that's why cheap cards, even more than a normal draft, over expensive ones. Martin Juza had the famous rule of, when I'm undecided between 2 cards, I take the cheaper one. In cube, it's that magnified manyfold.
Right. I think that for me, like if we were to, I don't, maybe we could, this probably isn't possible, but, if I could somehow see the cards that I take higher than most people, I almost guarantee it would be Ponder and Preordain. Like I never pass those cards. I almost don't care what's, there's a few, yes, if there's a Soul Ring or something, I'll take it over it. But of all the other stuff, like I just take those cards and let the rest figure it out, because man, you pick up a few of those things to do on turn 1 or to do a play on turn 3 where you play that plus a 2-drop or something. And it changes the way that your whole game plan goes, as well as card selection being more important. If you have answers, you're going to have the answer in your deck. You need to find ways to get it. If you have combos, you want to find the combo pieces. You just want to get to your most powerful stuff. And, I just can't bring myself to pass Ponder. Especially the version that they have right now, which is like old bordered with the cool hand art. It looks so, I can get that in real life, right?
Yeah, it's not cheap, but yes.
Okay. I think sorry. I need.
Oh, the foil ones aren't cheap. The normal one, I think it will run you, I don't know, $20 or something.
Okay. I think I might have to get one.
Maybe
anyway,
more, I don't know.
That to me is the classic, example of your first rule here of take cheap cards over expensive ones is Ponder and Preordain. I never pass them.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you take a 5 or 4 mana spell over Remand? It's basically never. It's just not how Cube works. So that's number 1, cheap cards over expensive ones. Number 2, take lands aggressively. Going back to how many playables you have, if you're going to play, let's say, for shorthand, right, 23 spells, 17 lands, or in Vintage Cube, a Mox can replace a land, but same thing. 23 spells, 17 mana sources. How much does it help you to have 28 playables, 30 playables? It doesn't, right? You're cutting those last cards. But lands get to take up those slots. And so I'm not even really talking about lands that have effects like Shelldock Isle or, Strip Mine or something like that, because those are good. I'm really just talking about lands that help fix your mana, because in a normal draft, 9-8 is the standard, right? And sometimes you'll have like a dual land and you're like, oh, cool, I'm 8-8-1, so I'm basically 9-9 in terms of mana sources.
Right.
That's just not good enough for Cube, because your opponents will have better mana than that. You want to minimize the amount of times you lose because you drew 3 islands and 0 plains. The way to do that is to take Tundra third pick, is to take, Flooded Strand first pick, which you obviously don't want to do that, but I don't feel bad when I first pick a blue fetch land.
Right.
And when you end up with a Cube mana base of, instead of 9-8 or whatever a limited mana base would be, you effectively have like 11 of each color, then you're in a much better spot, because it's even more important in Cube because there's more color intensive cards as well. Yes. If you've noticed over the last couple of years in kind of normal set drafts, most cards cost just 1 colored pip. They just try not to put too many cards that cost double color in, because those cards are hard to cast and people get mana screwed, and that's just not that fun. In Cube, there's tons of double or triple cost cards.
Yes.
And if you're playing blue-black and you're trying to play, Counterspell and Hymn to Turok, which are both great cards, you better have an Underground Sea and a Verdant Catacombs at the very minimum, or you're going to have a real hard time kind of reliably doing that, and your opponents aren't going to give you much leeway. There's just very little stumbling in Cube.
I think that there's a psychological component to both the first of your both first and second of your 2 rules here. Take cheap cards over expensive ones, take lands aggressively. These can feel like low impact picks. And when you go pack 1, pick 1, let's say you take a really, power card, something really great, a Mox or something. But now we're in the 3rd or 4th pick range, and you pick up a really strong card. Hey, look, it's Jace the Mind Sculptor, right? Wow, that card is really good. It's super fun. It's super powerful. But there's also, Polluted Delta, right? Scalding Tarn, something like that. And you're like, I'm going to be in blue. It feels really weird to take a Scalding Tarn over a Jace the Mind Sculptor, right? You're like, well, this card's really powerful, and like, why am I going to waste a pick on some stupid land or whatever? But the thing that ends up happening that maybe it isn't as obvious is that we are geared as limited players to seeing a super powerful card like that and feeling an intense amount of pressure to take it. Heck, even if it's not on color, if you're in a regular draft, you're like, oh my God, I just don't, got open to Troxel or whatever. I have to move in and take it. I'm not going to get this chance again. In Cube, you will. You have all the rest of this pack plus 2 fresh packs. You are not going to end up short on playables, but your mana, it might not end up being very good. So if it's even like a middling, a borderline card like Jace is, and Jace is borderline in the Cube, it's a good card, but it's not, the end all be all by any stretch. you should lean towards
I
these
disagree
lands.
with that. I think Jace the Mind Sculptor is amazing.
Okay, well, I don't. I think it's fine. I always play it, but I would take Scalding Tarn over it, for example. I find it somewhere in the middle. I think it's just okay. But at any rate, this isn't about Jace. This is about, how about Fact or Fiction?
Okay, that's a better example because I think Jace is quite a bit better than Fact or Fiction.
Okay, I don't. But at any rate, the point is that's the level of card I'm talking about. A powerful card you'd like to have in your deck that does good things for you, but you should be in the early part of the draft eating your vegetables, as we like to call it, right? Take those lands, get those cheap cards out of the way, and then, you'll pick up that middle stuff later on.
Yeah. So taking lands aggressively, super important, especially if you want to play 2 or more colors. And obviously there's some great cube decks that are 3 colors, 5 colors, whatever. As a side note, one of the reasons monocolor aggro is so strong in both of the cubes is because you actually don't need to take lands at that point, which does free you up to some degree. Mm-hmm. And then the third rule is draft decks, not cards. And you should be doing this even in normal drafts, right? We're already on the page of like, hey, you're supposed to be drafting a synergistic deck with a game plan. In Cube, it's again magnified because if you don't draft a deck that's doing something more than the sum of its parts, you're going to be behind most of your opponents. And sometimes that is a simple game plan. It's not like you need to have a real complicated game plan. Really aggressive is a game plan. Again, mono white, mono red are great in both cubes. These are just good decks to draft. But more what I'm talking about is don't draft green, black, good cards. That's the first deck everyone always drafts in Cube. And
yeah, I did green, white on my first Cube draft, and it was so miserable.
Right. And so you want to end up in a spot where you are drafting cards that are good and either really powerful on their own or work together really nicely. An example would be, cards like Counterspell or Cryptic Command or Venser or any of these like really powerful blue cards are just good on their own, right? These are just good cards. You put them in your deck, you'll be happy. Or Oracle of Moldai is a card I love. It's like one of the best cards in Arena Cube, I think, where you put Oracle in any deck and it's just like you don't have to have a game plan that goes with it. It's just awesome.
Right.
But on the other hand, when you look at a card like Entomb, 1 mana, put any card in your deck into your graveyard. Well, that card does nothing on its own. It's not an intrinsically good card in that sense, but it's the best reanimation card. So when you draft a Reanimator deck, Entomb is perfect. It's what separates the good Reanimator decks from the great ones. And that all of a sudden becomes, I've just drafted a card or a combination of cards that all of a sudden make my deck really, really synergistic and powerful. And then there's some cards that, cards like Emery or Frantic Search, which wouldn't be that good by themselves, but obviously can be fantastic in the right decks. And Field of the Dead is one of my favorite ones in Arena Cube, for example, where if you draft the right deck, Field of the Dead is just a really powerful way to end things.
Yeah.
If you don't, it's obviously not playable.
Right. So this is something that comes up over and over and over again for these is you often have to make these decisions on power level versus synergy when you're actually doing the cube draft. And the good news is that, power level kind of takes care of itself, but synergy is a little more tricky. Yeah.
And it's not bad to draft on power level if you don't know what you should be aiming for. But in general, you do want to look at drafting for a synergistic deck in order to really end up in the place you want to be. We should
also mention that certainly for the cubes that we're going to talk about here, but even if you're drafting somebody else's cube, you should have some faith in the cube architect, right? In the builder of the cube, that if you see a card like Entomb, right, you could think, Reanimator is going to be supported in this cube. Let's say it's the very first pick and you've never drafted the cube and you see Entomb in the pack, right? You shouldn't assume it's just random Entomb floating around and there's not really support for Reanimator. If they put Entomb in there, then you're going to find some number of reanimation spells and some number of discard outlets and some number of big things to bring back. And if they haven't, okay, fine, then you can yell at them afterwards and say, why is Entomb in your cube? But until proven otherwise, I would just assume that it's there. If you're dipping your toe in and you're going, okay, I know how to draft the power level stuff, but I'm worried about should I really go for X archetype? If the piece is there, then you have a reasonable green light to do so.
So those are kind of the 3 base rules. Obviously, every cube, there's a lot more to learn. But if you just follow those rules, you're going to end up a lot better off than you would if you weren't. That it's a good place to start.
Right.
So part of drafting decks and not cards is, of course, knowing what the decks are. So let's do a quick look at what the kind of primary archetypes are in both Vintage and Arena Cube. So for Vintage Cube, the three kind of like, or four, I guess, kind of level one archetypes where I think most people don't need a whole lot of explanation as to what they are mono white aggro, usually the most winning deck in the cube, followed by mono red aggro, the second most winning deck in the cube. And it might seem funny because there's all these powerful cards, but these decks are just really focused, fast, disruptive. They're very good. So they're basically
also underdrafted.
A lot of people also choose not to draft them because they want to do wacky, fun stuff. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
So these two cubes, or these two strategies, are really strong at really just putting a lot of pressure on the opponent, and then backed up by even a little disruption, a strip mine here and there, really does the job. So you end up being really happy about playing both mono white and mono red. There's also mono green. This is a green ramp that's trying to finish with like Craterhoof Behemoth, Primeval Titan, based off a ton of elves, Rofellos, that sort of thing. Natural Order, of course, a huge player here. Then there's the blue X control deck, and this is kind of like the default cube deck for a lot of people too, where you're just like, I'm going to put a bunch of good blue cards in, maybe a second color of whatever is open, and just kind of finish the game by countering or killing most of their stuff. And that, that part also seems fine. Like that makes a lot of sense to me too.
Yeah, blue-white seems to be the best one in the current Vintage cube, but blue-black's always a thing. Blue-red's different flavor of the same stuff.
Yeah, really the only color that doesn't end up doing this is blue-green, because blue-green is a pretty specific thing. Green doesn't add much to the control elements, but of course can still be very good.
Right.
There's also blue-black Reanimator, or sometimes mono-black. I mean, these are the decks that are looking to combine reanimation spells plus good reanimation targets. And, something, that ends up playing a lot of cards like Entomb, Exhume, Necromancy, with some pretty big creatures to reanimate. And these decks end up working out pretty nicely. I think a good Reanimator deck might actually be the best deck in Cube, because it can just turn to have a Gristlebrand or Archon of Cruelty to play. Yeah,
I find that there's two flavors of these. There's blue-black control that has Reanimator sub-theme, where you're playing cards that, like, a good example of a card that's good in this archetype is Liliana of the Veil. It's a discard outlet, but it makes them discard too, so it's not, an all-in discard outlet like, say, Putrid Imp is, where it doesn't really do anything other than let you discard cards. And you can play like a mid-range control game and then just go, oops, there's Grizzlebrand, when you get the right cards together, versus the kind of turbo Reanimator, which I think, like you said, if you get a good version of that, might just be the best deck, period, where, you're like turn one Entomb, go, right? And it's like, oh no, and you can get the reanimation target down super, super early and kind of overwhelm your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, the blue-black control Reanimator deck is really nice when you end up with, like you said, not a really too many all-in cards, but enough good, powerful reanimation cards that you kind of get there in that direction.
Right.
There's blue-red combo. This is another really standout cube archetype, which is basically good blue cards, red kind of artifact removal / burn plus combo pieces. So we're talking Splinter Twin, / Kiki Jiki plus Deceiver Exarch plus Pestermite. Zealous Conscript part of this too. Sneak Attack and Through the Breach plus like the big Eldrazi, various artifact like Tinker style decks. But the reason blue-red is so well suited is it gets to kind of play this control-ish instant speed game and then just combo finish where they just go land, maybe Remand a spell or Mana Leak something, and then go Sneak Attack, Sneak and Emrakul. Or end of turn Exarch on tap Twin. And it could be pretty scary playing against Volcanic Island plus Mountain, and then you're just like, they haven't done anything yet, but I feel like I'm almost dead.
Yes, it is very scary, especially because a lot of decks in cubes skimp on removal, right? They're more like, I'm going to do my thing, and then if you go a little too low and they just throw down an Exarch, you're like, well, never mind.
So the blue-red combo decks are great, and then there's Storm, which I don't recommend. Storm's a lot of fun. I think it's a cool deck to play. I generally don't think Storm is very good. I don't win as much with it as if I were, not drafting Storm. Right. So I think that's a big part of it, is just, don't go too deep on Storm.
And that brings up an interesting dynamic, right? Because you mentioned mono red, mono white having usually the top win percentages in the cube. And then you mentioned Storm being really fun, but not really having a good win percentage. And this is a personal decision that you need to make, because I'll tell you what, if you sat down and it was like, okay, everybody buy in for $1,000, winner take all, right? So it's 8K on the line, bunch of pros or whatever playing vintage cube. Mono white would no longer be as easy to draft, right? Like people would know, okay, this is a winning archetype. But right now it's open like a lot of the time because people just don't want to do that. You'll find people forcing Storm. I know you couldn't possibly imagine somebody doing that, but they do. And, you know, meanwhile, you're over there, you know, taking all these really good underdrafted white cards and beating up everybody. Well, if there was significant stakes on the line, that dynamic would change a lot. And that's a decision that you have to make when you sit down. You know, if I told you you could draft the same old mono white deck every single draft for the whole season and you would win, you know, a huge percentage of your drafts, you might be like, hey, that's good enough for me, right? Like I just like playing and I like this deck. And so, yeah, I'm going to go for it. But I know other people who would just say, well, that's just like a waste of my time. Like that's not what I come to Cube for. You know, it's not that I don't want to win, but I don't want to, you know, play a boring deck. I want to play something interesting. So they end up in that middle ground. And then you got the crazy people that want to go for Storm, just to see if they can do it, even though they know it's an uphill climb. So, you know, these are the things that you have to decide before you sit down. What are the stakes? Are they meaningful to you? You know, is winning what you're prioritizing? If so, then these monocolor decks tend to do the best. If you're looking for, you know, more powerful, interesting stuff, you can go in the middle. And if you're a crazy person, you can go for Storm.
What's funny is Alpha Frog, Gavin Thompson, he ran a Cube Invitational on Wednesday, which was 32 like Cube drafters who signed up for the tournament. And I watched Sam Party's stream, and he drafted Storm and went 2-0 to make top 8. Then he actually won. He drafted like a Jeskai mid-range deck in the top 8.
Oh, that's sweet! Wow.
But he actually did draft Storm.
Style and victory for Sam. That's incredible.
Well, what he did was exactly what you said, which was he drafted a lot of anti-creature stuff because there was just more creature decks on average, because those decks are actually a little stronger when everyone's really trying to win, you know.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
So those are like the main archetypes. Really, you can combo any two colors that are open to some kind of archetype, but I find they mostly fall into those buckets, which is like the red, white, and green kind of monocolor focus deck doing what that color very loudly does, and the blue X control, Reanimator, blue-red combo, and then like some kind of Storm nonsense. So a lot of cool stuff you can do there. But Cube, you know, knowing what these decks are and how they work is really important for kind of succeeding with them. Right. For Arena Cube, it's kind of similar. There's mono red aggro and mono white aggro. Those both definitely exist. The green ramp in Arena Cube I find to be multicolor more than monocolor because it's missing some of the high end payoffs, you know. But the fact that the ramp spells can fix other colors means you can kind of play the best cards of other colors instead, and that tends to work out pretty well. I like Feel the Dead a lot in this deck as well, where you're just kind of playing Feel the Dead, tons of dual lands, and just like the best cards of all colors, with green as your like primary color for like Cultivate, Oracle, Moldiah, that sort of thing. There's blue X control, which is often like blue white or blue black or blue red, again, kind of like the vintage cube. Though blue red also has its own like kind of firm archetype of blue red spells, where you get paid off for playing a lot of spells. Blue white can often be a blue white blink deck, so this is more of a mid range deck with a whole bunch of flyers and ETB effects and ways to blink them. And then there's like
that's my favorite deck, by the way, in that cube.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
you can do some very cool stuff with it. And then there's like black white sacrifice life gate. And again, in Arena Cube, every two color pair has nominally some kind of archetype going. But like green red and green blue, I find to be both kind of the same, which is green dominated ramp, and blue X is mostly control. I do find the aggro decks to be much stronger monocolor, and the reason in both of these cubes is you just can't afford to not be able to play your 2-drop because it's a white card and you drew 2 mountains. So it's so much better just to be monocolor. Mono red and mono white both win a lot. Red white does not win as much. So try to be monocolor if you can in this sort of situation.
Yeah, and I want to talk about like at least my big picture approach to cube drafting. And I think it'll help especially if you're newer or if you're struggling with it, to kind of conceptualize how cubes work from a big picture perspective so that you can understand how to drill down into the actual draft portion. So usually the way my brain works with this stuff is I'll group cards in the cube cards into different groups. Okay. So you'll find subsets of cards that have like a similar function. That's one of the groups. For example, and for the reason that you'll want to know the range of cards within a subset. And I'm going to give a bunch of examples of subsets of cards, and then you can stack rank them to yourself based on what you like, what you think performs the best or the worst, or you can ask people what they think. So that's important to know, just which are the good versions of the thing I'm going for and which are the just okay versions of it. So that's important. But also you'll want to be aware that how many of these effects there are. Right? Like if you're looking for a specific type of effect, are there a lot of these in this cube, or is it something that you really need to lock down when you see it? So to use two different examples to illustrate these points, the first one is, so imagine a group of cards that are all similar, and then you need to rank them. Right. So let's, like blue cantrips, for example, we can say, let's just take 4 of them that are, I'm going to use a vintage cube as the template for these. There's Preordain, Ponder, Portent, and Brainstorm. Okay. Let's just say that those are the ones that are in the cube. They all cost the same amount. They all give you some card selection and a card back, and they all do it in a different way. So Luis, for the purposes of this, how would you rank those?
I think that Preordain is overall the best, but Preordain, Ponder, and Brainstorm are pretty close, and Portent's like a clear worst of those. Agreed,
right? And then Brainstorm has this random upside where if you've got like 3 or 4 fetch lands, all of a sudden it kind of jumps up into the fray with the others.
Totally. Brainstorm has the highest ceiling, but Preordain and Ponder are the most consistent.
Right. And so, and by the way, this is why we love Magic and love Cube, right? We could have a whole discussion about these cards. Just, when is Brainstorm better than Ponder or Preordain? Portent's interesting. You can target your opponent with it. Is there situations where that's powerful? Yeah, there are. It's kind of interesting, right? So, but you need to be aware that there's groups of cards like this, and then which ones are the ones you want in which situations. On average, you would just take Ponder or Preordain. They're roughly comparable to each other and be happy with it. And then, Portent, Brainstorm are a little bit further down the line. To illustrate the second part, though, the one where how many of these type of effects are in the cube, there's reanimation effects. And I didn't list quite all of them. I think there's a couple that I did. In fact, I'm sure there's I can't remember what it's called, but there's another one that I missed. But there's cards like Necromancy, Animate Dead, Reanimate, Makeshift Mannequin, Shallow Grave. What's the other one I'm thinking of? The one that gets you back for a turn.
There's Corpse Dance and Exhume are the two.
Oh yeah, ones. Exhume's the big one I missed, but Corpse Dance was the one I was thinking of, with the one with buyback, right?
Yeah, it's basically Shallow Grave for 1 more mana, but it also has the buyback option.
Right. And so, so there's 2 things, of course, that you can take away from this. First off, once again, we can stack rank these, right? What are the most powerful, what are the best versions of these types of cards, right? And generally speaking, these tend to go in like mana order, right? Like Reanimate's probably the best, and then it's like, Exhume and Animate Dead, and then probably Necromancy, and then we also forgot the one with Flashback too, for white.
Oh, and Burial Rites, yeah.
Yeah, and Burial Rites as well. I'm getting these down just for people that see the notes. And again, that one costs 5 mana at sorcery speed, only your graveyard. So like, that one's going to be lower on the list, but also you can discard that one and give yourself a reanimation spell. You can, what's it called? The card we were talking about earlier, go grab it from your library and put it in, and you got a reanimation spell that you kind of could tutor up. What's the card I'm thinking of? Stupid black, go get a card from your library, put it in your yard. We talked about
Entomb.
Entomb it. You can entomb it, right? Yep. And all of a sudden you've, basically tutored for a reanimation spell. So there's little wrinkles here. So you want to do that. But one thing that should stand out to you is that that's a lot, right? Necromancy, Animate Dead, Makeshift Mannequin, Shallow Grave, Corpse Dance, Exhume, Reanimate, and Burial Rites. That's a lot of those. And you need a couple to make your deck work. But it does mean you could take a risk on, say, passing, a Shallow Grave. If there was a really good reanimation target or a really cheap interactive spell or a land that you really needed, because that there's a lot of these. And if you've got like 2 more packs to go, you're probably going to be able to pick one up, assuming that you're the only one who's in the Reanimator deck. So you need to be able to break down cards into these groups so that you can understand the power spectrum on them, but also just the sheer amount. Like, is this a hot commodity, or is this something I'm actually going to be able to get my hands on? And there's a bunch of lists that I've made here to kind of give you the idea of how I group things together so that you can do it for yourself. And the next one is reanimation targets, right? Things that you want to get back. Grizzlebrand, Archon of Cruelty, Iona Shield of Emeria. And this actually goes all the way down the list to even cheaper, down to like 4-mana creatures that you sometimes just get back because, hey, that's the one that I happen to have. But what are the premiums, right? For me, it's Archon of Cruelty, then Grizzlebrand. Those are the two that are like clearly, to me, head and shoulders above the rest. Do you agree with that, Luis?
Yeah, I think Archon of Cruelty is actually number one. Grizzlebrand number two.
Right. And then there's other ones that are good, but like those are like, if I can get my hands on an Archon of Cruelty, I'm like, we did it. Like, that's the one. Sweepers, right? Wrath of God, Damnation, Toxic Deluge, Fumigate. There's a whole bunch of them, as it turns out, in the cube. And you know what? They're not really that high priority. So you can pass one and hope to wheel it, or figure you'll get one later. And then again, you can stack rank these. Toxic Deluge is the best one, I think. Cheap or free counters, right? Daze, Force of Will, Force of Negation, Spell Pierce, Mana Tithe. They cost 1 or 0 mana that can interact with your opponent's stuff. You want to know, for example, Force of Will is a card that I'm very loath to pass. Like, that's the type of card that I really want to have my hands on because it can break up, like the Reanimator deck, for example, and it can allow me to get a Planeswalker on the battlefield, Force of Will something, and then start going to town with it. Those type of things, all the time. And of course, it goes without saying, but being aware of these cards when you're trying to play around stuff is important as well. Burn spells, how important are those? Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Char, Burst Lightning, Firebolt, Incinerate, Lightning Strike, Fire Blast. There's a billion of them in the cube. Which are the best ones? Oh, stuff like Lightning Bolt tends to perform the best, the cheapest, most efficient ones. But as you can see, there's a lot of them in the cube. So if you're the red deck, yes, you need some number of these. But, if you see a Firebolt or Incinerate or a Lightning Strike, it's not like you must take it. You will get other stuff along the lines, and you need to know that. Draw 7s like Wheel of Fortune. I don't even want to say this, but Wheel of Misfortune, that card is... Wow, that might be the ultimate have to read it every time somebody's casted against me.
Oh, yeah.
I just know I'm happy that they're casting it most of the time, but also I'm just like, am I supposed to pick a number? Like, what is happening? Time Spiral, Time Twister, these type of cards. These are hard to replace. Gain control of their creature cards like Control Magic, Sower of Temptation, Treachery, discard outlets for the Reanimator deck, Una's Prowler. And then you can get a little bit tricky too. Like there's stuff like Putrid Imp, Una's Prowler, but there's also cards like Liliana of the Veil that I mentioned before. Bone Shards is in the cube. That's actually a discard outlet. Like you can kill their creature and discard
Bone
your
Shards is great.
And it's really good. Yeah. Collective Brutality, similar. If you want to get a card out of your hand, you just escalate it and boom, you can ditch whatever you need. Stuff like Hand Disruption, Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, Hymn to Turok, Collective Brutality again. Again, are these in high demand? Well, they're in higher demand than like a burn spell would be for the red deck, but there's enough of them that, you're not going to be starving for them if you're in the black deck. So, and then there's more groupings that you can do as well. So you should always be looking for, what type of card am I in the market for? I need some cheap interaction and I'm in blue. Okay. So the counter spells, the 2-mana counter spells, let's say, right? Okay. We start thinking, all right, Mana Leak, Mana Drain, the cycling one, right? And you're like, okay, I need one of these ones. Which one's the best? How often am I going to be able to get these? If I see one, do I need to prioritize it or not? And you can keep going through this over and over again. And the cool part is that every time they change the cube, the rankings change. And sometimes they take one of the pieces out. So where before there was, tons of ways to reanimate your cards, maybe over the last 2 iterations, they took out 2 of them. And now, you know what? You really do need to take that card while you still can. And then, of course, and again, this is really the thrill and the joy of cube, is that you can go so deep with this stuff. Another good example would be, let's say that you're in the Reanimator deck, but there are a subset of reanimation cards that you can play at instant speed, right? And that let your creature attack right away, or you can bring it on an end step and then get in attack with it, like Corpse Dance, Shallowgrave, Makeshift Mannequin. And you know what you can get with those? Some of the cards that you can't normally reanimate, right? The ones that shuffle themselves into the library, like Eldrazi's and stuff. So if you happen to have 2 really, you have big Emrakul plus a good Ulamog or something, all of a sudden you're like, hey, if I have a way to discard this card and then I can Corpse Dance or Shallowgrave it, those cards go up and you might want to build that version of Reanimator. Most of my Reanimator decks don't use those cards. I usually don't play Shallow Grave or Corpse Dance. I usually try to focus on like the Necromancy, Animate Dead, Reanimate type cards. But you know what? That is a sub archetype, right? Of the blue-black sort of shell that you need to know these ones are prioritized higher for me because I happen to pick up these 2 legendary Eldrazi's or whatever. So there's a lot there to digest, but knowing these groupings can help you understand which archetypes to go for, which ones are harder to get, and then how you need to maneuver within them once you're in there. Now, so that's one way to group cards. The other group of cards, there's 2 other ones that in the broadest of strokes, okay? And these are cards that are similar to the ones that we just looked at, except for that instead of having a whole bunch of cards, 5 or 6 that have a similar effect, they're pretty unique. They're very difficult to replace or they're irreplaceable. Some of the cards that come into this category are cards like Opposition, right? 2 blue enchantment. Tap a creature you control to tap an artifact, land, or creature your opponent controls. Okay. So that's the type of thing that you can use to completely dominate a game if you are also a creature-based deck. If you go like elf, Opposition, you tap down their lands on their upkeep, and there's no other card that fills that role like Opposition. Strip Mine, right? Seems simple. You think, okay, well, Strip Mine's pretty good, but why do I need to prioritize that? Well, you can build around it. There's 2 different cards in this cube minimum. There's actually 3 that I can think of off the top of my head that allow you to repeatedly bring back Strip Mine from the graveyard, right? And that means that you can lock your opponent at whatever mana they're at, and then eventually you'll whittle them down because they'll miss a land drop, and they may not be able to come back. If you can set up a combo like that where you have Strip Mine plus a way to bring the card back from the yard, you can win. There's no substitute for Strip Mine. It's the only card that fills that combo piece. So if that's what you're going for, you absolutely must take it. Fast Bond. Green lets you play as many lands as you want. You pay an additional life for each one past the first. This is the type of card that if you, for example, play cards like Draw 7s, right, where you can go like Fast Bond, play 3 or 4 of my lands, and then play a Draw 7, you can reload, play 3 or 4 more lands out of your hand, and you can get way, way, way ahead of your opponent. It also works well with cards like Upheaval, which, by the way, is the next card. Upheaval. There aren't any other cards that completely reset the game in that way because sweepers only kill creatures and Upheaval removes every permanent from the board. But if you can generate a huge mana advantage, you can float mana, then reestablish your position before your opponent can. That's irreplaceable. Some cards are a little more narrow, like Narset Parter of Veils is kind of a mid-range, annoying card for your opponent that can get you a little bit of card advantage normally. But if you have these Draw 7s, if you have 2 of them, all of a sudden Narset becomes one of the best cards in your deck because you get to draw 7 and they get to draw 1, right? And no matter what they had, they're just going to be on 1 cards. That's huge. Bribery, similar thing. It's like there's no other card like Bribery in the whole cube. If you get to fire off a Bribery and your opponent's playing any type of ramp or Reanimator deck, it's usually GG. Tinker, similar. Recurring Nightmare, not quite as powerful, but again, there's no other thing that lets you loop your creatures out of the graveyard repeatedly like Recurring Nightmare. If you're in mono red, Sulfuric Vortex, 1 red enchantment that says nobody can gain life and it pings each player for 2 on their upkeep. That's an irreplaceable source of damage and with a reliable effect on it that's very difficult to deal with because it's an enchantment, not a creature, not a spell. Once it's on the battlefield, most decks are just like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to lose to that as it kind of keeps them in a lock. Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin, there's 2 of these, so it's a little bit of a subgroup, but they obviously enable the combos that Luis talked about. Storm Deck Yawgmoth's Will is one of the only ways to really, really do the Yawgmoth's Will thing. Sneak Attack is a card that stands out as a way to cheat in creatures. That's again, there's a few other ways you can do this, but Sneak Attack's really in a league of its own. Channel, it's one of the only ways to get an Eldrazi down on turn 2 in the cube. Natural Order, Luis mentioned that one earlier. Fantastic, early mid-game play to just seal the deal in a green deck. Fractured Identity, this one, you moved it, right? Yeah, I'll hold on to Fractured Identity for a minute because it's actually just sick, powerful. Tolarian Academy, right? This is a land that can tap for 10 mana depending on what your board state is. You said though that just as a side note that you've actually bumped this one down a bit.
Yeah, I feel like Tolarian Academy is busted if you have like 5 to 7 cheap artifacts and some more expensive ones. Mm-hmm. But I long past are the days when I would third pick a Tolarian Academy, even if my first two picks were like mock Signet. I just don't see it coming together often enough. It's the sort of thing where I'll take in pack 3 if my deck's good for it. I just wouldn't advise slamming an early Tolarian Academy at this point. It's just not where you want to be. The same's true of Yawgmoth's Will too. Like,
yeah,
a lot of the cards on this list I don't mind taking early because you said, they're kind of irreplaceable and they're like drivers for a whole deck. I'm fine second picking Kiki Jiki, for example. You first picked a Remand or something. Kiki's a great second pick, but a lot Academy, Yawgwill, these are cards that like I kind of take them when the deck's good for that, not take them and hope to draft the deck around it.
I do the same. The point I think of a list like this is to show the contrast between this and the other types of cards that we just mentioned, right? Reanimate is an amazing Magic card, right? It's one of the more powerful cards in the cube. And it's a type of card that can do really broken things, right? But there are many forms of that Magic card, right? Reanimate might be the best one, but there's 5 or 6 in there that accomplish a similar goal. So if you needed to pass Reanimate for some reason, you could. Here, or let's talk about a middle ground card, one of the worst ones, you could pass those. If you're in the Kiki Jiki combo deck, you can't pass Kiki Jiki or Splinter Twin ever. Like, you have to take it. You are not getting another chance at it. There is not another one in the cube, and that's that, right? And that's, similar for like Tinker. Let's say you've got the pieces for a Tinker deck. You can't be like, well, I can pass Tinker because I'll get another way to cheat in my, Inkwell Leviathan on turn 3. You won't. Like, that isn't how this cube is set up. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do is contrast. Like, these are not passable if they're good in your deck, where the other ones are, you need to do a value assessment on, do I need this here? How important is it for me? That type of thing. Going back to the Tolarian Academy discussion, where are you at on Gaia's Cradle? Because it's been typically at the same level or similar as Tolarian Academy. It's still there, right? Like, isn't it still just awesome? I draft it pretty high. Yeah,
Gaia's Cradle's good. I don't, I try not to take it until I know I'm in green, but once you're in green, it's almost always good as opposed to Academy, which it's only good, 15% of the time or whatever.
Okay, how about Shelldock Isle? Say something nice about Shelldock Isle.
Big fan of Shelldock Isle. It can do some pretty nice stuff.
I knew you weren't going to bash Shelldock Isle.
Well, I have known the cube has gotten faster, so slower cards like Shelldock have moved down a little bit. You just have a lot of people like red and white aren't underdrafted anymore. I feel like I play against red or white almost every single draft at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because they both combo really well with blue, which is still just heavily overdrafted. There's enough blue cards that if you want to be blue, you can just be blue, but it's never open, right? It never feels like you're just like, I'm getting all these great blue cards. So those are cards, and there's more, but those are kind of the ones, going through the whole list that stood out as like, we'll call them unique effects. They're not literally that, but they're effects that are very, very difficult to replace and don't have a lot of redundancy in the cube.
The only one I'd add is Entomb, because it is irreplaceable in Reanimator.
Perfect. Yes.
There are other ways to get cards into your graveyard, but nothing is as good as Entomb. It both finds the creature and puts it in the graveyard. Every other card only does one of the two.
That's right. And that's huge to be able to double up on that. So Entomb, perfect addition to that list. The last category is a little different. So oftentimes these cards will share properties with the list, the unique effects type thing. But these are more so busted that you will often find cards that are similar to them in the cube, but these are like the top best versions that do borderline or even just cross over into that broken realm where even though there are others, these ones stand out. A great example of these are a lot of the power cards. Like, think of the Moxen, right? The Moxen are the best lands effectively in the cube, right? They are lands that you can play as many of as you have in your opening hand, and that completely breaks the game. I mean, this is why we call cards broken, because that literally breaks one of the rules of the game, which is you can play one land per turn. Black Lotus probably doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. Time Walk is a combo card in the cube in some ways. Like, it's very rare that you play Time Walk and don't have ways to do it again at some point. So it's that, and then also just brutal efficiency. I mean, it's always been funny to me in kind of a cool way, Luis, that both Time Walk and Time Warp are in this cube.
Yeah, I mean, it's Ancestral Recall versus, every other card draw spell in the cube, right?
Right. But I mean, it's literally the same text, and it's like 5 mana versus 2. It's like, it's not 1 mana, right? It's like a huge gap. Ancestral Recall, of course, best card draw spell of all time. And Soul Ring is the best of the mana ramp, artifacts. But here's a really good example of a card of which there are many similar cards in the cube, but this one is so much better that you just have to take it when you see it, which is Mana Drain, right? I mean, literally straight up counter spells in the cube, right? So that's fine. Mana Leak, you mentioned before, miscalculations in the cube. There are 2 mana cards that are nice little counters and do things, but Mana Drain is on such its own level, being so much better that it must be respected and taken in that way. Mana Crypt is similar. Oko.
Yeah. So once you get past the Power 9, Mana Drain, Mana Crypt kind of thing, Soul Ring is part of that too. There's a couple actual just Magic cards that were printed in the last couple of years, which is funny. Oko is definitely one of them. I find Oko is just the best planeswalker in the game and the cube. Mm-hmm. It just beat a ridiculous selection of cards. Mm-hmm. Fracture Identity is another one I get on my soapbox all the time about. Just 3 blue-white sorcery. You exile one of their permanents, and then you get a token copy of it, which gives you the enter the battlefield effects. Their thing's gone forever, no matter what. You can cast it on planeswalkers. It's just absurd. And then
win percent after resolving a Fractured Identity, very high.
Oh, extremely. It's one of the things that turns a game around like no other card. Your opponent's like, I played a Grave Titan, and you're like, okay, Fractured Identity it. Now I have a Grave Titan, you don't. I still got the zombie trigger,
Yeah, you mentioned it too, though. The 2 subtleties to the card are you get the ETB and that theirs is exiled. That comes up all the time in cube because look, if I told you, okay, great. I have that card too. It's called Control Magic. I can cast it for 4 mana without white. What's the big deal? Your card's gone and I have it now. And it turns out that the way that Fractured Identity actually plays out, especially in the subset of cards that are the cube, is completely different than just stealing their thing. It's just completely different.
Yeah, it's just obscene. Palace Jailer is another one. This is the 2 white 2/2. When it ETBs, exile target creature until your opponent becomes the monarch and you become the monarch, which means at the end of your turn you draw a card. They only become the monarch if they can hit you with a creature, which is just not that easy to do.
There's some decks that really have a hard time with that.
Yeah, and you can play Palace Jailer on an empty board. It's still really good. The card is just straight up busted. And
it's also misunderstood, right?
Well, yes. Magic Online puts the creature exiled under the Jailer.
Yes.
I've had a lot of people kill my Palace Jailer. It does not do anything.
It does not come back. I can't tell you how many times I've had people shatter pause after killing my Jailer and be like, what's going on? Where's my creature? And it's like, you got more work to do, friendo. It's really rough card.
So I have those cards in the tier kind of above the rest of the cards below the power. The last one I want to mention is Library of Alexandria. This debate, it's a gift that never stops giving. I still think Library is not as good as a lot of people think. I have come around on it in the right decks, but Cube has gotten faster, and man, Library of Alexandria sometimes just does not do the thing you want it to do.
Trash. I never even play it. Garbage tier.
All right, well, there we go.
All right, I may be being a little hyperbolic, but it honestly has gone way, way down. I mean, when I first started cubing a long, long time ago, Library was in the discussion for best cards in the cube, full stop. Right, because you could take it, put it into any deck. So people were like, hey, and it is middling now. It's fine. You can play it. Sure, take it, have some fun with it. But I mean, I'll take it is very much in the middle of the pack versus near the very, very top. So to recap here, if you want to understand how Cube works from a big picture perspective, you should group your cards into 3 broad groups, right? One of them are the ones that have similar effects to each other, and then you can rank them within there and understand the subtleties of that. The other one are cards that provide a relatively unique or actually unique effect that, could be critical to how your deck plays out. Think of these as like the build-arounds for the cube. And then the last category are the cards that are so busted that you just can't ignore them, even though they may have similar effects otherwise in the cube.
Yeah, and I think that's a good set of things to kind of break down what the different cube cards are that you could be taking a look at.
Yeah, I think that if you do that as well, it gives you an idea for what what archetypes are supported and aren't supported in the cube. You know, because you could modify the groupings however you saw fit. Like, for example, you could do one that doesn't really, like the cards are kind of different from each other, but you could say, like, what are the spells payoffs cards? Right? Like, so you're like, okay, here's Soul Scar Mage and Monastery Swift Spear and Young Pyromancer, right? Okay, these are kind of similar, but then it gets a little weird, right? There's some other ones that pop up in the cube that are like, okay, I guess that kind of counts. And, you know, you could decide, you know, for yourself, which cards would go into that category, and then of course how to do it. Anyway, that's just meant to be a broad strokes framework, for the big picture. Do we have any other things we want to hit on before we, take off here?
Yeah, I have some notes about the Arena Cube specifically.
Okay.
Lands are really important, which is true of Vintage Cube, but the thing about the Arena Cube is there are just fewer lands available,
right?
Which means more often you can't play as many colors as you might want, you know, which is part of it. But also just you should really prioritize getting lands, because the having, you know, 2 blue-white lands in your blue-white deck just goes so far in terms of actually getting to cast your spells and play the game. The other is play to the board. Way more creature decks than in Vintage Cube, of course. We're not talking about all these old busted spells they used to make. So I very much prioritize cheap creature removal. Sweepers are good. Creatures that have good power and toughness are just good. Like a lot of the kind of cards I wouldn't like. Like Fatal Push is a great example of a card which I'll put in my deck most of the time in Vintage Cube, but isn't like, oh, cool, I got a Fatal Push. It's like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll play this. This is my last card.
Yeah.
In Arena Cube, Fatal Push is great. Just a great card. You know, it kills the 1-drop early out of your mono red opponent, but it can still kill your opponent's Oracle of Moldiah when you're playing against Green Ramp, you know, right, if you set up the Revolt. And then on that note, kind of cheap interaction is at a premium. Like, it's just really important to have cards that kind of interact with your opponent. Cheap counters are great, you know, cheap removal. And then good ramp is also really good because there's no busted Moxen. So, you know, or Lotus, you're not going to play against a blue red deck that's like Black Lotus turn 3, you know, Inferno Titan.
Right.
So cards like Cultivate really go a long way in just getting you to exactly where you want to be for all these really powerful big spells. There's a lot of really good, you know, 6-7 mana spells in Arena Cube, and being able to play them, I think is really, really strong. So big fan of the ramp spells. And then just kind of going along with the playing to the board thing, there's a lot less synergy in Arena Cube than Vintage Cube, just because there's just fewer really powerful engines. So you're not going to play against that many unfair decks, which means drafting a good fair deck is totally fine. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, usually those type of decks and those type of cubes end up coming down to the stuff that it ends up feeling like more like a supercharged version of regular draft, where things like, you know, like card advantage, grinding, the ability to answer your opponent's threats, those kind of end up being the more important things, where if you look at Vintage Cube, it feels a bit more skewed towards kind of doing the most powerful thing you can as early as possible, and kind of hoping that overwhelms your opponent. You know, matchup dependent, etc. But that can be a big core of like a ramp deck is like, hey, it's turn 3 and I'm going to play a 6 or 7 drop or whatever, right? And can you beat that? You know, Reanimator, I'm going to get an 8 mana creature down on the battlefield on turn 2 or 3. Can you beat it? Right? It's kind of posing a question to your opponent, where when you take those aspects out of it, it becomes more of a attrition thing, more of a slugfest, that type of thing. So you should be prepared for that for Arena Cube for sure.
Yeah, I love Cube. Cube is my favorite way to play Magic, just straight up.
Me too.
I just cannot get enough Cube. So, you know, I love when we get to do an episode about Cube, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, we hope this was helpful for you. Kind of whatever level of Cube you're at. If you're a seasoned Cuber, then, you know, you'll have your own opinions and methods here, but hopefully it's a good refresher. And of course, if you're just getting into Cube, or if you're kind of trying to figure it out, we hope that it'll help you, you know, get your sea legs under you, because Cube is daunting, but worth it. That's how I describe it. The first time you Cube draft, you're just like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, this is just overwhelming. I have to read all the cards, you know. I mean, I wonder, we should have somebody count how many different mechanics there are in the Vintage Cube, let's say, right? I mean, it's just got to be so many when each one's represented like once or twice.
Oh, there's one day-night card, you know?
Yeah, there's one, right, exactly. That kind of thing.
That's not that tricky of a mechanic. You'd have to be a real buffoon to get that one wrong.
I do agree with that. We're going to call it a show there. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and Luis is LSV, pretty much everywhere. You can also find everything related to the show over at lrcast.com. All the old episodes of the show, and then the links to all of our stuff right on the front page as well. Also, our sponsors, right? We've got channelfireball.com, so make sure you check them out for all your, magic needs as far as sealed product or singles or supplies or anything like that goes. And of course, as I mentioned before, they are a marketplace now, so you can check out the marketplace there. Also, FTX will remind you, we've got the charity Vintage Cube tournament coming up tomorrow. So this show goes up on Friday. It's on Saturday. We're going to play at somewhere in the 8 to 8:30 p.m. Pacific range. And I know that Luis and I, at the very minimum, will be streaming on our streams. So look forward to that, and hopefully we can take home a bunch of money for our favorite charities. And we want to thank once again FTX for supporting us in this, and then also for putting on the event. Full stop, really awesome, and we're looking forward to stuff like that. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. We'll see you next week.
So this is at the risk of stealing future show material, which I love to do with my sign-offs.
Yeah, you do.
There was actually a kind of funny interaction I saw earlier, which kind of prompted this. So, the professor, Tellurian Community College, basically tweeted, like, don't wait till you have perfect equipment, just do the thing, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need, I started with some terrible camera or whatever.
Right.
And you responded and you're like, yeah, you don't need you don't need a high quality equipment. You just need to kind of get out and do it. You started with, I'm sure, terrible podcasting equipment and whatnot.
It was bad.
And
yep.
It's a really good example, because one of the things that we hear very often when talking to aspiring content creators is, oh, I'm just waiting till I get my whole streaming rig and then I'm going to start streaming.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting until I get X, Y, and Z. And really the answer is not, yeah, you need to wait till you have the 4K camera in order to film the blog you want to film. It's, you should go with the minimum viable product and really focus on what you're making, not what kind of equipment you have, because it is very easy to be caught up in that, because especially you look at some of these videos, your watch videos are super slick, right? Like really well edited, really high quality equipment. You have these ridiculous tools like, all right, well, this tool is used to wind the watch. It only specifically does that one thing.
Yeah.
This is a tool which is used to clean the inside of the fob. That's all it does.
Yes.
It does nothing else.
Yes.
I've watched a few videos at this point.
I like it. Yeah, you're not wrong.
But you can't look at you who have, now 13 years or so of like content creation experience and equipment built up, and think like, I need my videos to look that good for people to watch them. Because the answer is you don't. I mean, I think we all know that some of the highest paid YouTubers are just folks filming with terrible equipment and just saying incendiary things. But that's a whole different thing.
That's very true. Yes.
So really what I want to encourage you is, if there's something you want to do, I mean, within reason, just go for it. Obviously, like, you can't, be a bike racer if you don't have a bike, but you can go out and start without having a $5,000 bike.
Yes.
You're not going to win, but you get to start doing the thing. And then, when it comes to, like, for example, content creation, if you have a good idea and a good product and you execute it to the best of your abilities, even without the top of the line equipment, that will give you the momentum and feedback you need to maybe acquire that or get closer to that.
Yes. And then you can add it in over time. I could not agree more. I think that's really great advice. I think a lot of people that come to me, and maybe to you too, to ask about content, ask about equipment, cameras, microphones, computers, and then they ask about the YouTube algorithm and how to make thumbnails and how to do all this stuff that is really not where you should be focusing your energy. It should be on the content. You should come to me and say, how do I make my podcast better? How do I make it more engaging, more useful, more relevant for my audience? Not, how do I go from 1080 to 4K or whatever?
I mean, trust me, Marshall's like actively bad at optimizing that sort of thing. You resist it. You really do. We had to convince you to start, putting clickbait in your titles, but
I do hate that stuff. Yes. But
But I mean, you're kind of the textbook case of focusing on product over kind of like peripherals.
Right.
Right. And I get it, because here's a really powerful driving force for a lot of people. You know, if I just had the top of the line or really good gaming computer with a good camera and a good mic, I could be just an awesome streamer. I don't have those things now, but you know, I'll eventually get them and then I'll be a great streamer. It's a lot easier to tell yourself that than put yourself out there and like maybe succeed, maybe not. I don't know. Streaming is actually particularly hard to succeed at. We're both very much like, you probably shouldn't try to go into the things we have because you're just not it's going to be hard to succeed. But that's a whole different conversation. What's harder to kind of stomach is that a lot of the people who are successful are there because they got there first. Huge part of it. Like, Ninja didn't come out of nowhere and start having, 200,000 people watch him. He streamed for a decade, right?
Right.
And he was one of the earliest streamers streaming a lot of the kinds of games he streamed. And I was one of the first people to make draft videos. Not that that's like a revolutionary concept. There just weren't that many people doing it in 2009.
No.
And I just put them on the internet.
Right.
And like, would I succeed now if you erased me and I was just me, my same person, started now? Probably not. That's just, it's very crowded. Like, Kenji's been, a full-time streamer for 5 years, and an active streamer for
Kenji's
8 or something.
Longer. I think he's been full-time for like pushing 10 and active for like 12.
Yeah, just an incredible amount, right?
Yeah.
Like, I and what I'm trying to say is that a lot of what makes people succeed isn't things that you can easily just purchase. So go out and do it. The other thing is try to find an angle. Try to find something new. If you try to do the same thing everyone else does, you're not that likely to succeed unless you have something different than what they do, because there's a lot of people who are already doing that thing.
Yes.
Like, there was a time when like, hey, I'm pretty good at magic and I'm pretty good at talking. I'm charismatic. That's going to be enough because I'm going to do it reliably. Kenji and Caleb both kind of broke through by doing like the 365 challenge where they just stream every day, right? Mm-hmm. And like a big part of that is people knew they could show up every day and watch those guys. Would those guys succeed if they had to enter the market right now? The odds are they wouldn't. And it's not a knock on them. I said the same thing about myself. It's just, it's hard to succeed. So try to find a new angle of attack, and also just try to do something you really love. Like, you didn't picture, oh, this watch channel is going to be something that pays my bills. You're like, hey, I want to do this because I like learning about this.
Just wanted to do it. I wanted to share it. That was it.
Yeah. And that was it. And then you eventually you are getting there, and that's because you have a lot of things that that go in your favor, of course. But I think a big part of that is that you just have to put yourself out there. You have to like learn, iterate, figure out what's working, what's not, and don't rely on. There's not really any easy fixes or shortcuts. You can't just be like, if I have the right equipment, then I'm going to get there. There's a lot of people with nice bikes who do not win bike races. That's just not what it's about.